Welcome to Rotary on July 20th, 2015. We're glad you're here. We'll get started today with the singing of our national anthem, led by Jim Smithly. Thank you, Jim and Ellen. Audrey Brown will now lead us in our invocation.
I invite you to pray according to your faith tradition as I pray according to mine. Let us pray. Almighty and eternal God, we give thanks this day for your many blessings, for the food you have set before us, for the hands that prepared it, and those that receive it. Lord, these are trying times for our city, state, and nation. As such, let us recommit ourselves to service as outlined in the prayer of St. Francis of Assisi. Lord, make me an instrument of your peace. Where there is hatred, let me sow love. Where there is injury, pardon. Where there is doubt, faith. Where there is despair, hope. Where there is darkness, light. Where there is sadness, joy. O divine Master, grant that I may not so much seek to be consoled as to console, to be understood as to understand, to be loved as to love. For it is in giving that we receive, it is in pardoning that we are pardoned, and it is in dying that we are born to eternal life. These things we ask in your holy name. Amen.
Thank you, Audrey. Please be seated. I'll invite Becky Earhart to come forward to welcome our visiting Rotarians and guests. As she's doing that, go ahead and put some money in the cart bucket. Someone from each table would hold up the cart bucket for a second, put some money in it. A little light last week, so if we could step it up this week, that'd be great.
Good morning, or I guess good noon. We have 3 visiting Rotarians, and when I read your name, if you wouldn't mind standing up, we're thrilled to have you here. Ned Toller with the West Metro, so good to see you. And Scott Adams with the West Metro. Jimmy Williamson from Shore, South Carolina. Great to have you here. And for those of you that have guests, if you'll stand up and we will introduce them also.
We have quite a backup back here in terms of people waiting for shrimp, so that's why it's kind of empty right now. Matt, welcome.
Thank you. My name is Gary Smith, and my guest is Tony Stidham with Palmetto Private Park.
My name is Jesse Bullard, and this is my guest, Sarah Eves. She's one of our newest members of the team at Southern White.
My name is Bariba Harris, and my guest is Linda Umberger from the Carly for America PAC.
Good afternoon, I'm Jeff Griffin with W.O. Blackstone. I'm pleased to have as my guest today Jeff Rubel and Warren Darby, both of the South Carolina Power Team. Thank you.
Anybody else? Well, we welcome all of you, and we're thrilled to have you. Thank you.
We want to welcome Jimmy Williamson. Jimmy's a past district governor, and we're glad you're here today, Jimmy. Good to see you. Next is Rusty DePass for Health and Happiness.
Thank you very much, President Mark. And thanks also for the information that you passed along to me about club members. Catherine Davis, for instance, is presiding this week over the 69th Annual Convention of NABS, that is the National Association of Bench and Bar Spouses. And she is the national president of that group. Carrie Powers, is Carrie here? Has accepted a new position as the president and CEO of the IRMO Chamber of Commerce, leading the free towns. And congratulations to you, and let me tell you, they believe in commerce out in IRMO. I can tell you that. John Denise will, is John here? Not here, resting on his laurels, I guess. John Denise will be featured tomorrow, is it tomorrow? No, 23rd, by Startup Grind. Startup Grind is an event hosted by the University of South Carolina Columbia Technology Incubator under the Google for Entrepreneurs Partnership. And they host monthly events featuring successful local founders, innovators, educators, and so forth and so on. So congratulations to John as well. I made a bit of an effort this morning, not terribly successful, but I made a bit of an effort to locate some of our older members, people we perhaps don't see as often as we used to. And I was able to reach Sam Pearson. I don't know how many of you would remember Sam, but he used to be the director of the South Carolina Bar Foundation. And was a member of this club for quite a number of years. Sam was giving a presentation in 1997 at a bar meeting in Hilton Head and had a cerebral hemorrhage while he was making his presentation. Anyway, he will be 80 in January. He works out at Gold's Gym twice a week and works in the yard a little bit. Elaine is his loyal companion and nurse, and they seem to be very happy. Some of you may know that Mick Lurie is in an assisted living facility in Atlanta, so he and Nancy can be near their son, who is a doctor in the Atlanta area. His memory is fading somewhat, but he is generally happy. What is it? Is it this? I don't care, but I'm just thinking it might be irritating. Is that better? Anyway, Murray Price. Does anybody remember Murray Price? Murray informed me that his wife died 3 months ago, which I did not know. He lives alone now. He's 94 years old, still drives, and ushers at all the funerals at St. Stephen's Lutheran Church in Lexington. And just sounded good and strong on the phone, and So I'm sure he would appreciate some contact, as of course would Sam. This information also came to me today that Jim Levinas has been moved to the Life Care Center on Faraway Road, Faraway Drive. And he is in room 407 there and can receive cards and visitors after 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Jim, just apparently, you know, Jim's a big guy, and I've often wondered how long Laura could handle him. But he is doing well, just needed a little extra care. As a sort of an educational feature at this point, I thought I would acquaint you with an experience that I had some years ago. Just out of curiosity, how many of the men in the audience, just by raising your hands if you're not too ashamed to do it, but how many men in the audience here have ever had a mammogram? One. Okay. Well, hopefully you will appreciate what I'm about to say. I was at a Rotary Club meeting here a number of years ago, and I had just busted a fingernail. And I sat down at a table with a new member, a woman, whose name, honestly, I can't remember. I wish I could remember it. And anyway, and I was complaining about my fingernails, they were splitting all the time. And she said, well, what I would suggest is if you don't mind going into a drugstore and asking for the kind of vitamins that pregnant women take, that you might want to avail yourself of something like that, and it'll help to strengthen your fingernails. So I thought, well, you know, that'd be far less embarrassing than other things you could buy at the drugstore. So I decided to do that, and I started taking these vitamins. And it wasn't too long before a small knot appeared in my chest, on the right side of my chest. And so I didn't think much of it. It's kind of irritating, but I didn't think much of it. So the next time I was at my doctor's having a physical, you know, we got to the end of the physical, and he said, as these doctors these days want to do, well, do you have any problems? Everything's going okay? And I said, yeah, everything's fine. But I said, as a matter of fact, I do have this place in the right side of my chest, a little knot. And so he felt around there and so forth. He says, I think you ought to see a surgeon. I said, a surgeon? What are you talking about? And he said, well, you know, it's possible for men to have breast cancer and so forth and so on. So anyway, I ended up the following day or week or whenever it was in the office of Dr. Alden Swetman, whom I'm sure many of you know. And Alden and I have been friends for years, but let me tell you, he is all business when you get in that office. And so got in there, and he says, well, I'm not inclined to think that it's much of anything, but I think you need to have a mammogram. I said, oh, mammogram? Wait a minute. This is taking on a life of its own, you know. But he insisted, so the next thing I'm sitting in this room with all these people, while this secretary is, or nurse is on the phone with some lab out in the Northeast, and she says, I have a Mr. DePass here who needs a mammogram of the right breast. I said, no, chest. and anyway, to make a long story shorter, I ended up in this place somewhere out across from Providence, Northeast, and so they ushered me back into this little room, and the nurse said, would you mind taking off your shirt? I said, fine. So I took off my shirt, then she brought me this gown, and she said, you might want to wear this while you're waiting. And I said, I don't have any problem sitting here with my shirt off. That's fine. I can understand women might have a difficulty with that, but I don't. And so, anyway, they got it. I thought that a mammogram was like a chest X-ray. In other words, you just got next to the wall. Hey, that ain't what it is. That ain't what it is. So anyway, this woman comes in. I hope this is not embarrassing for women, but the woman comes in and says, we get this thing where you're trying to expect. No wonder these women don't like to have these things done. But anyway, so we got this thing in a place, and and I'm sitting there looking and watching what she's doing, and I said to her, I'm sorry you don't have more to work with than you do. And she assured me, she said, Mr. DePass, there are women who come through here who would be proud to have what you have. I said, thank you, I think. Anyway, to end my tale, it turns out that what I had was something called senile. I could have done without that. Senile gynecomastia. And like I say, I can handle the gynecomastia, but the senile was tough to take. Anyway, I hope all of you can avoid having an experience like that. But it was a whole lot of, it wasn't funny at the time, but it has become funny since then.
Not sure what to say about that. Nothing is fine. We're glad you're okay, Rusty. And thanks for reaching out to our members that aren't here or not doing well. That's awful nice of you, and shows the service above self, certainly. So thank you for that. Next, we have Carrie Powers, who's going to make an announcement on our communications. Over the last couple of years, you've seen Carrie do lots of different things to improve the communications of our club, and she's got an announcement for us today.
Thank you. I'm not sure what I'm supposed to say after that. That is a really tough act to follow. I just wanted to give you guys a really quick update on the state of our communications. Past President John, that sounds really weird. So past President John did a really, really good job of constantly reminding you guys about our website. And if you don't check our website on a regular basis, please do. I do try to update it every week with last week's video. So if you miss a meeting, you can always go online. I think I say that every single week, but if you miss a meeting, you can go online, you can make it up, you can let Debbie know that you watched the meeting, and I do record all of them and post them online. We're available across all the platforms. You can see us on your iPad, you can see us on your mobile, and you can see us on your desktop or your laptop. So anytime you need any kind of information whatsoever about what's going on, from a calendar of events, I have all the speakers updated through the end of the year so far, and pretty much anything you want to know you can find on our website. Also, you can find us on social media, because when I post to the website, it automatically posts the information to Twitter and Facebook. So one thing I would like to challenge you guys to do, if you are active on social media, if you would please share when you see an update, if you would share it with your friends. The more people we reach, the more chairs we can fill here at our club meetings, and the more members we can bring in. So if you see it, please share it. If Roger Colson is here, he's my very best sharer. He always shares what I post, so I appreciate that. Mark, you're very good at it too. Thank you. So if you see it, please post it, please share it with your people. Also, every Sunday I send out the email newsletter. So if you haven't signed up for it, if you're a newer member, if you haven't been as active, if you're retired and don't use your email account as much, please take the time to go on our website and sign up for the updates, because you know, it'll put it all right there in your inbox. You can just click through and read anything that I've posted. And also, I had a little factoid that I thought was kind of interesting. I'm able to view our traffic on the website every week to see how many people come in and like what their search terms are. People come in and search for our scholarship a lot, wanting information on the scholarship. They search for membership, but a couple of weeks ago, we had a record number of visitors to our website since I took it over a couple of years ago, and we had 176 visitors in one day. And the number one search term was .Ryle. They were all searching for you to find out information on the loss of your son. And this club is pretty amazing, and really, I feel like, wrapped you in their arms. So it was really great to see that we had so much interaction on our website that day. You know, it wasn't going to crash it or anything, but it definitely showed that we cared. So that's all I ask of you guys. Please follow us on Twitter, like us on Facebook, visit the website, sign up for the email, stay informed. And also, if you have anything that you'd like for me to post, please email it to me. I'll send out my new email address once I know what it is. I start my new job on Monday, so once I know what it is, I'll be happy to post what you guys need me to post. All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Carrie, and congratulations again on your new job. Our next announcements from past President Roger Stroop.
Thank you, President Mark. Mark has just learned something that all past presidents can tell you. Once you turn the microphone over to somebody, you are out of control. Mark has asked me once a month to talk just a little bit about Columbia Rotary Club history. This club will be 100 years old on December 1st, 2016, and you'll be hearing a lot more about that. But I'm going to talk a little bit about the history each month and give you just a few things of updates and some little bit of information. We were the third club chartered in South Carolina. Greenville and Spartanburg had been chartered a few months before us, and those two clubs sponsored us. We were the 264th club in the Rotary world at that time. The club had 20 charter members, and if you look down that list of charter members, you'll see Albert Sidney Johnson was our first president. You will see people from the Department of Corrections, from the Department of Mental Health. You'll see leading businessmen, and you'll see some names which you still see in the members of the club today. The Columbia of 1916, however, bears little resemblance to the Columbia of 2015. In 1920, Columbia's population was 35,000. In 2015, it's somewhere around 135,000. But given our strange annexation laws in the Columbia area, perhaps the best comparison of the metropolitan area in 1920 was 113,000, and today it's well over 500,000. At that time, the new State House was 13 years, the dome on the old new State House was 13 years old, and it dominated the city skyline. And if you wanted to move around Columbia, the best, most efficient way to do that was streetcars, which ran all the way from Columbia College to the fairgrounds, all the way from the river to Fort Jackson. The city's lone skyscraper was the National Loan Exchange Bank building, and it towered over the others on Main Street. On January 23rd, 1917, the club voted to hold its regular monthly meeting in the Jefferson Hotel in the Rathskeller, which was an area in the ground floor, and that was where we met for many, many years. Albert Sidney Johnson, the president of the club, was the executive secretary of the Board of Charities and Corrections, and he encountered his first controversy when they voted to raise the lunch fee from 50 cents to 60 cents, which would be the equivalent of $13.14 in today's buying power. So stay tuned. Next month we will take a look at the seven different places where this club has met over the past 100 years.
Thank you, Roger. Look forward to hearing more and more about our club as we near next November and celebrate our 100th year in existence. So thank you. I'll turn it over now to Ted Creech, who will introduce our program today.
Thank you, President Mark. Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
President Mark asked me before I introduced Lonnie Carter as I think perhaps an initiative for some of the newer members to introduce themselves a little better. So you wanted me to maybe say a minute or two about myself, and so I'm happy to do that, and then I'll introduce our speaker. My name is Ted Creech. I'm Director of External Affairs for AT&T in South Carolina, and I direct the community affairs and local government relations and economic development efforts for the company across South Carolina. I've been at AT&T, and then before that Bell South, and gosh, even before that Southern Bell for 28 years. And one of my first bosses is in the back of the room, Joe Anderson. Before a telecommunications career, was in radio and television. In fact, was hired to the PR department in Southern Bell from WIS-TV, where I was a reporter. I do a lot of work, I guess, on economic development matters, helping local economic developers with information about telecom infrastructure regarding their sites that they might attract local business prospects to, and have done a lot of work in the community also with respect to economic development. One thing that our speaker today and I share in common is that we were both chairs of the Charleston Regional Development Alliance at one point in time when I was in the Charleston office. I chaired the Alliance Board when we recruited Vought Aircraft to Charleston, which then became, years later, Boeing. And the success continues there for sure. My wife Rosa and I have 3 sons. We just saw the oldest of our sons, 26-year-old, married a week ago in the Mount Pleasant area. We are members of St. Thomas More Catholic Church, the Catholic presence on the University of South Carolina, so I'm a proud member of the Cocky Catholics flock, and very happy to be a part of this club. In fact, I was a member of the Rotary Club of Charleston when I was in the Charleston office for Bell South, and actually attained Paul Harris Fellow status there. So enough about me, but I'm very happy to be here with all of you at this club. Our speaker today is Lonnie Carter. He is the president and CEO of Santee Cooper, South Carolina's state-owned electric utility. The Santee Cooper Board of Directors named Lonnie the company's 8th CEO in 2004. He joined Santee Cooper in 1982 as an employee in the controller's office, and since that time he's had various positions of increasing responsibility, including manager of corporate forecasting, vice president of corporate forecasting, and senior vice president of customer service. And Lonnie serves on many boards in the community, the Palmetto Economic Development Corporation, obviously the Charleston Regional Development Alliance, the Trident CEO Council, and the Trident United Way. And Lonnie is a Citadel man, 2 degrees from the Citadel, and actually in 2005 received the Distinguished Leadership Award from the Citadel Business Hall of Fame. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Lonnie Carter.
Thank you, Ted, very much for that kind and warm introduction, and thank all of you for letting me join you with this great lunch that you have today. I have to say, in my job, I get to go around and speak to a lot of different clubs and a lot of Rotary clubs. I will admit that only a few of them invite me back, so don't get your expectations up. But I believe that might be one of the best lunches I've had at a Rotary Club in a long time. But please don't go back and tell the Moncks Corner Rotary Club. I'm going to take a few minutes. I know one thing I've learned about Rotary clubs. If I go beyond 1:30, I will be speaking mostly to myself. So what I'll do is I'll try to get through my comments pretty quick and give you an opportunity to ask me some questions. But let me tell you a little bit about our company. Because I say ours, because if you're a South Carolinian, it is your company. The state is our sole shareholder. We're a state enterprise created by the state of South Carolina back in the Depression era. The state never put a dime into Santee Cooper. We were created by a $34 million grant from the federal government and a $30 million loan, which has long since been repaid. So today, we're the state's largest generator of electricity in the state. We serve roughly about 2 million people in the state in all 46 counties. Closer to home, we have our direct retail served area in Berkeley, Georgetown, Norrie counties. There are about 27 large industrial customers and 1 Air Force base that we serve, 13 municipalities, and of course, all 20 of the state's electric cooperatives who are scattered, quite frankly, across the state. I mentioned that we were created during the Depression in 1934, and at that time, our mission was to improve the quality of life for South Carolinians. That is still our mission today, and we do that mainly by providing affordable, reliable, environmentally sensitive power and water. I'm only going to touch on water for just a second. Obviously, we own the 2 big lakes in the state. In fact, as I go around, particularly if you get in this part of the state and further west into the upstate, as we call it, most people know us as a place to go fishing. A couple of lakes and a few fish, maybe. But we do take water from both of those lakes and treat it and sell it into the surrounding areas. A very, very small piece of our business, but a way that we can help promote economic development, which I'll talk about in a moment. That has always been an element of what Santee Cooper was asked to do by the state. We certainly have a very, very strong environmental record. We were one of the first electric utilities to put on scrubbers in the southeast. Scrubbers remove SO2. We can talk more about regulations later. But the thing that we're most proud of today is that we were the first electric utility in the state to actually generate and provide renewable power, and then also actually sell it to our customers all the way back in 2001. Today, we have some 130 megawatts of renewable power either online or under contract, expecting it to come online soon. We also have had a long time program associated with energy efficiency. One of your colleagues was talking to me earlier about the importance of energy efficiency. One thing that I'll say, that if you travel abroad, and particularly if you go to Europe, you'll find that one of the things that we in America do is we are wasteful when it comes to electricity. It's just a fact. It's just the way that we live. But of course, there's a big reason for that. Electricity is cheaper in this country than it is in most European countries. So maybe we've done our job too well in that regard, but I haven't seen anybody showing up at our rate information meetings, and I'm sure my good colleague, my friend over here, Lee Michael, I bet nobody's showing up at y'all's either and saying they ought to be higher. You don't hear that. Yeah, that was a joke, y'all. Y'all gotta pay attention. Nobody asked us to make our electric rates higher. Historically, we generated about 80%, a little over 80% of our energy came from coal-fired generation. And there's a reason for that, which we'll touch on in just a second. In the last couple of years, that has been below 60%. So in my career, I've been in this business for 33 years, I have to confess. And that's where I got all this gray hair. Actually, it came from my children, who are all now, they were all teenagers. Right before they all became teenagers, I had dark hair. And about the time they came along and got in their teenage years, it turned white. I see some of you nod your head, you know what I'm talking about. Anyway, in that 33-year period, I have seen, and you can tell from my background, I was a planner. If you didn't catch that in my background, it gave you, I'm a planner. And I've seen this happen. You could not build a natural gas-fired generator. Then you could not build a nuclear generator, all because of regulations. The law of this land did not allow electric utilities until about 1988. Between the time we had our Arab-Oil embargo in 1988, you could not build as a primary fuel source a generator fired off of natural gas if it was greater than 25 megawatts. That was the law and the regulations of this country. And then, of course, regulations stopped the nuclear industry in the mid to late 80s. And so why did we end up with a lot of coal in the southeast? That was all we had left to make electricity. And we would not be having this meeting in this room today were it not for electricity, because air conditioning has transformed the southeast. It is what has allowed us to develop and become competitive with the Northeast. It's just a fact of history. And so I tell you all that to tell you that regulations do matter, and they do drive this industry heavily. And so we will see over time that we will use less and less coal, because coal is out now. While you might say, well, the regulations don't say you can't build coal, the fact is that there's no coal plant that can meet the regulations. And everybody at EPA knows that and put those regulations together. Well, maybe not all of them, but most of them know. So, what we have just heard, I guess, is a little bit about a laundry list of accomplishments and a little history on how we got there. But all of our accomplishments today could not have been done without partnerships. We're very heavily dependent on those partnerships. And of course, two of those key partners are headquartered here in Columbia. Of course, one of them being SCANA, and of course the other being the Electric Cooperatives of South Carolina. For years, we've served directly the Myrtle Beach area and seen a lot of fast growth. And we worked together to work with the electric cooperatives to, I guess, capitalize on all of the growth that we're seeing in the eastern part of the state particularly. We just recently, with the electric cooperatives, signed a 45-year extension of that agreement. So we will continue to serve them until 2058. I'll be 99 years old in 2058. Do the math, figure out how old I am today, right? I'll be 99. I have already informed the board that I don't plan to negotiate the next agreement, but would like to be invited to the signing ceremony. Anyway, that partnership has run very, very deep. And you might say, well, why did I mention that? Why is that important? What it lets us do, a long-term agreement with the electric cooperatives, lets us match our debt, these long-lived assets that we have, these assets that we build and have 40-year lives. It lets us match the principal and interest payments, so the mortgage associated with those facilities, with that contract. Absent that, we would have to sort of do what we would call cram the debt forward and use a very complex and meaningful finance term. We're also, of course, in the process of building the nuclear units, which I just mentioned with our other partner, SCANA. And that could not be done without teamwork. Another area of teamwork that I want to mention is what we do together with economic development. Some of my colleagues are here from the South Carolina Power Team. I see Bernie Maybanks here who ran, I guess, the Treasury Department, Revenue Department, we call it here in the state. What I will tell you today is that no one person, no one organization can take credit for landing Volvo or Boeing or any significant asset or industry that we locate into this state. Generally, the groundwork has been laid years before, as was the case here, and then it takes a number of folks to execute. So what I would just say to you is that the work really just begins for a lot of folks once we get them located, particularly those of us who have to, either run the pipes or the wires to them that have to do that sort of work. But even more important, one of the big things we need today for economic development in our state is to continue to develop our workforce. I know, Judy, you've worked a good bit on that over the years. We could not do it without the technical college system. So keep that in the back of your mind. I know most of the people probably in this room have a 4-year college degree. But I'm going to remind you that of the over 1,700 people that work at Santee Cooper, of course, power plants are a pretty complex business, as you might guess. About 3/4 of those jobs do not require 4 years college degrees. Today, they require more advanced degrees, 2-year degrees, things like pipe fitting, welding, E&I technicians, and the like. And they pay pretty well. They pay pretty well, just like most of the jobs that you'll see at Volvo will be those same types of jobs that require high skills. We need our students graduating from high school and then going on to continue that development of their skills somewhere else, at least certainly a lot of them at the tech school. So anytime I speak to a group of business folks, I know you hear a lot of things about our education system. We need to really stay focused on, as I like to think of it is we put our children into a pipeline, if you can think of it this way, and they come out of that pipeline at all different places along the way. We need to get them, as many of them, as far through that pipeline as we can. And really, quite frankly, I know it's maybe an unrealistic goal, but eliminate those of them that drop out before they reach that, if you will, that point of exit of high school diploma. We really need that. That's going to be meaningful to our state as we continue to be successful as a team to recruit these businesses in our area if we don't get most of our population to take a lot of those jobs. Let me just touch one more moment on our nuclear facility with SCANA and that partnership. Santee Cooper and SCANA are part of building one of only 2 sets of nuclear units being built in this country. So what's going on right up the road here together is the revitalization of the restart of the nuclear industry in this country. Most people in this country believe that climate change is happening. Outside of how you might personally believe about it, it doesn't matter. When the vast majority of people in this country believe something, things start to move in that direction. That is certainly something else my 33 years teaches me. So if you believe that we need to have less CO2 going into the air, then nuclear power is one of the few ways that we can do it and really make a meaningful difference in it. So I tell you that as a country, we need to make sure that we build more of these units and get this industry restarted. In spite of what you might hear, not everything, I know we probably got somebody in here from the press, so don't be offended by this if you're in the media, but they don't always get it right. The project that we're building today, including the cost increase that has been asked for by the builders, does not exceed the original budget for the project. It doesn't exceed Santee Cooper's budget for the project, nor did it did SCANA's, because the contingency was taken out of that project for SCANA. We didn't have to take our contingency out. Now, I know everybody's surprised to hear that. And to my colleagues at SCANA, they're not going to stand up and say that because they don't want to beat up the Public Service Commission or anybody. That's moving on for them. But the reality is that project is still going very well. The biggest problem with that project is when it will come online. When is its biggest problem? And that's what we are very much focused on. I certainly don't mind saying this for my colleagues at SCANA. We have been focused on that for several years now. That is our goal, to make sure that the consortium brings those units online, because we will not get the benefit of them until the units come online. It's no more complicated than that. So let me just wrap up real quickly and tell you that we don't have natural gas in the eastern part of our state. You don't have good natural gas infrastructure here in Columbia, the kind that it would take to fuel big power plants. It's all, and if you look at it in this state, it runs along I-85. So we actually own and operate a big gas-fired generating station up near in Anderson County. So why do we have to go way up there and run the lines back here? That's where the fuel source was. So one of the big things that we need to do in this state is get big natural gas pipelines in the eastern part of our state, because it will help the entire state continue to develop. That is a big issue for us going forward, and us as we manage to continue to bring some balance and diversity, if you will, to the generation mix that operates in the state, because that's what's important. In 2007, Santee Cooper and its board adopted a goal that we would get 40% of our generation. We would go from getting 10% to 40% of our generation from non-greenhouse gas emitting resources. That included a nuclear building program, a conservation program, and a renewables program, which I've hit on all of those in these remarks today. That's where our future is. That's where the future is in the state. So we need to work together so that we make sure that we continue to provide environmentally responsible power that's affordable and certainly reliable. So with that, I'll be glad to take a few questions. Yes, sir.
This prohibition of coal, how much is that going to cost your typical customer?
This prohibition?
Coal-fired power plants being shut down. How much is that going to cost the typical South Carolina customer for Santee Cooper?
A lot. A lot. And the short answer is that
Big question.
How much is these regulations affecting coal plants and causing them to shut down? How much is that affecting customers' bills? And the short answer is a lot. If we actually put on our bills the cost of environmental equipment, so to put that into context, for us, it's about 20% of our asset base. We're a little over $10 billion in assets, about $11 billion now in assets. So almost a little over $2 billion of that, I think $2.3 billion of those assets was solely for environmental equipment. What will happen today, though, is there are a number of regulations going into place, and they will continue to go into place over time, and it will cause us to retire coal units, in my opinion, premature before we've really gotten all the useful life out of it. And that's the real downside. Often I get asked about, maybe some of you saw recently the Supreme Court actually gave EPA a so-called setback. Well, every utility executive looked at that and just shook their head. We've already had to spend your money, because that's what we do at electric utilities. We're ultimately going to collect what we spend from customers. So we've spent your money already to come into compliance with the Mercury rule, which is the rule that we're talking about. So all of that work's been done. We've either retired units, talking about the industry as a whole, certainly we have done some of all of this. We put on the monitoring equipment that we're required to do, and we put on the control equipment that we would be required to do to come into compliance, because we can't wait until the last minute to put in this complex equipment. So what I would say to the Chief Justice and the rest of his justices is y'all are irrelevant. You're too late to the game.
Are wind or solar as renewable, viable energy sources in South Carolina?
Are wind and energy resources viable? Certainly they're viable. And we have studied wind a great deal and have a fair amount of solar. But the wind doesn't blow all the time, and it blows poorly in the state unless you get about 15 to 20 miles offshore. We've done those studies. So the wind in this state will be built offshore. Now, unless you work for an engineering firm that helps with permits, you don't want me to try to go build an offshore wind farm. It will be terribly expensive. If you're curious about offshore wind, there's a book out called Cape Wind. Just read that book. It'll tell you about over a decade of somebody simply trying to get permits to do it. These resources are intermittent. They really are. Because they don't operate all the time, we have to have machines that we can pour fuel into, is the way I look at it, put it in simple terms, and make electricity when you want it. The interesting thing for us about solar is that it brings absolutely zero capacity back to us. Because we peak during the winter. Might surprise a lot of you to know that our peak is higher during the winter than it is any other time of the year. And that's generally sometime between 6 a.m. and 8 a.m. And if you're up at 8 a.m. in the wintertime, you know it's not near as sunny as it is even at 8 a.m. So a solar facility, if it gets 17% capacity factor, that would be the equivalent to how many widgets can you make with your maximum capability. So it's only about 17%. So they have a place. We've proven that they have a place. We've partnered with the co-ops to do them all throughout the schools, in a number of different locations. Got a big one down at in Colleton County. But they are difficult to do what we would call integrate. So the utility industry is not opposed to them. I don't know anybody that's opposed to them. But we're the guys that have to show up and tell you how much it's going to cost. At the end of the day, that's what the electric utility industry has to do, all of us. No matter whether it's an electric co-op, a city, one of the investor-owned utilities, or Santee Cooper, we have to show up and tell you what it costs. So that's why sometimes people think we're opposed to them, but I can assure you, I don't know a utility executive, that we don't really care what type of generation we put in. We just want to make sure you can afford it and it's reliable. Because those are the times when we get telephone calls from our customers. Yes, sir.
I'd like to see deny tankless systems available on the coast, but our challenge is that the natural gas is not available. That's just one example of how that can benefit consumers. I think the cost of natural gas is a good replacement for the coal, which you took time to put out here. What is the status of the big pipelines you're talking about being established?
Well, I'm not a pipeline expert, but there are some. You even have some here in Columbia. But there's a Dominion Resources has looked at putting in a pipeline that would end, it really would come out of what's called the Marcellus Shale area, which is where a lot of the new gas is coming from fracking, which is in Pennsylvania, West Virginia, that area. It would come east into Virginia, through West Virginia, east into Virginia, and then really sort of track right down I-95. The only problem I see with it is it stops at Lumberton, about 50 miles from the state line. If you look to the south of us, there's a pipeline called the Elba Express that really runs sort of down from the big Transco line that I talked about earlier up near Anderson, comes right down the Georgia side of the Savannah River and stops down near Savannah. And so what would really make a lot of sense, and if our government was really, I know y'all can tell I'm down on our regulators already. What I want them to do is tell us what we, if they had, if we ran our utilities like they run the regulatory business, we'd be in trouble. We need to set some goals, establish them. We are certainly not opposed to cleaning up the air, any of those things. So if you read that in any of my comments, I'm more than happy to clean up the environment. That's not the issue. The real issue is what's it going to cost and how reliable can we make it? And I believe that if we really want to, what we ought to be doing is encouraging pipelines and building for natural gas. And that's what we'd like to see. We'd like to see that Dominion Resources line extended right on down I-95 and tie down in near the Elba Express. It would make a lot of sense, not just for the state, but for the country, and it would benefit all of the states all the way along this pipeline in a lot of different ways. So stay tuned for natural gas infrastructure. It's going to be an issue because we expect natural gas prices to stay low for the next couple of decades. Yes, sir.
Max, are you still in negotiations with them? They were talking at one time about moving that plant to Algeria where gas was cheap. Have y'all worked an agreement to give them a rate to keep them amongst gone?
He's asking what's the status of our negotiations with the Mount Holly aluminum smelter. It's no longer owned by Alcoa. It's owned by Century Aluminum. Century Aluminum always owned 49.7% of that plant since it was built back in the late 70s and came online in 1981. So that's just a minority partner bought out Alcoa. The short answer is yes, sir, we are still in discussions with them. Those are confidential negotiations at their request. Let me just say this, that aluminum smelter was the last aluminum smelter built in this country. At that time, there were 33 aluminum smelters operating in this country. 5 today. So I think we've done a pretty good job of keeping that aluminum smelter alive for a long time. What we cannot do, and what we will not do, and what I've been thoroughly instructed not to do, is to subsidize it. Because otherwise, then all of our other customers, including the other 27 industrial customers I mentioned that employ some 8,400 people directly, when you look at them, then I put them in jeopardy. You cannot do that.
What kind of loads they put on you? How many megawatts a day do they use?
They're 400 megawatts. Yes, sir.
Is there any future in South Carolina for just plain water-generated electricity?
Water?
Yeah.
Or hydro?
Yeah.
Actually, there's some interesting, there's some that could be done, but again, if you put yourself in the utilities perspective on that, they're very risky to permit. Very risky. There would be very small systems, small meaning just a few megawatts, and there are a number of places that they can be put in. Your federal government paid for a study, I think it was done by Idaho Labs, paid for a study to be done, and one of the places that if you go look for that study, you'll see that one of the places they suggested one to be put in was in the Congo Green National Swamp. I'll be glad to buy the power from that if one of you want to get it permitted. I know y'all really think I'm down on our regulators. I will say, I think DHEC does the best job they can with what they're given. Most of our problems originate out of EPA and federal regulations, federal law. And it's not that we don't want to do something about what they're asking us to deal with. It's the way they go about it and not giving us the latitude to say, we want you to have this amount of emission by this date, you get there however you can. They have a tendency to try to specifically tell us what we ought to do. And that's not a good idea. That's not even a good idea for me, and I'm the head of the company. I usually need to ask smarter people to figure this out. Yes, sir.
I was listening to a program recently about Europe where they're moving towards, even in residential things, charging by the hour of the day that you use with computer and smart appliances. Are we moving towards that eventually?
Yes, sir. We are there now. We've had time of use rates, particularly for our large customers, for a long time. Years ago, we actually even put in real-time price rates to some of our large industrial customers. And if you look at both our commercial and our residential rates that we're out, we have a rate proposal out today, and it deals with time of use rates as well. Definitely something, again, trying to give the customer the appropriate price signal. Obviously, it costs us more to generate electricity on a very hot or very cold day than it does at night when the temperatures back off. And so we want to give what we would consider a price signal for the customer to use our product as efficiently as they can. Okay, that's the sign.
Lonnie, thanks for your time. Appreciate you being here very much. We do have a token of our appreciation.
Thank you. I'll keep this for that 19 or 2058 sign.
Yeah. Well, you're welcome back anytime. Thank you. In closing, I want to mention a couple things. First, welcome again to our guests. If you have any questions about Rotary and want to learn more about it, just ask. We're glad to have you today. Our next week's program, next Monday, will feature Bruce Cannon. Bruce is an expert on mental illness, and will talk to us about the effects of mentally ill and what's going on in our jails and emergency room hospitals as a result. So come back for that next Monday, and as we close, let's stand and we'll sing.